Thank you for being with us today on this webinar. We're going to be talking about integrated planning and long-term planning. We've got a great lineup here, and we've got everybody who's going to be speaking shown here. We'll go through before we get going, we'll talk about what we're going to be talking about in a second. Before we do that, I want to first introduce the National Municipal Stormwater Alliance. We are hosting this along as with a partner with EPA and the city of Santa Fe, New Mexico. Before we get going too far, I want to give a little bit of background on NMSA, the National Municipal Stormwater Alliance. We are a 501c3. We've been around since about 2018. We're a coalition that is focused on the MS4 program and representing the interests of MS4s across the country. Our motivation for our formation is listed there. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but basically we're trying to unify the MS4 sector and be more proactive. And really what we're trying to do is help provide clean water through having a better MS4 program overall and supporting MS4s in general. So that's where we're coming from, and that's our vision. Our membership right now, we've got 26 state organizations representing 4,400 MS4s. So we've got more than half the country represented. We also have MS4s that are joining us directly. Washington, D.C., Baton Rouge, and Thurston County, Washington are examples. We're going to be adding a lot more MS4s in the future, and if you want to learn more about that, there's a link right there. You'll get a copy of these slides, so you can get to this link that way. We also have affiliate members, which are anybody that's not an MS4 or not a state organization representing MS4s, and that's technologists, consultants, law firms, and whatnot. So those are our affiliate members. So if you want to learn more, just go to our website there. Don't want to spend a ton of time on that. Just wanted to give you some context where we're coming from. The compelling question today that we're going to be focusing on is what is integrated planning and long-term planning in the context of MS4s? And I think it's a topic of interest for us, and it's a question that, being the organization that represents MS4s at the national level, it's a question that we've had internally and with our members about we hear the term integrated planning. And a lot of times that's in the context of combined sewers and CSO communities and whatnot. But what does it mean to MS4s? I think that's one of the things we're going to hear today. So that's really the overarching question that we're going to be addressing. But really, this is about planning at the end of the day. And Dwight D. Eisenhower famously said plans are worthless, but planning is indispensable. And what was he saying there? He was saying it's, plans may fail, or we may not follow our plans as they're written, but the planning process itself is the thing that has the value. And if you think about it, we all, those who are here and interested in this topic, we have permits, right? We have NPDES permits. A permit is not a plan. A permit helps to define parts of the plan, but planning goes beyond that. So we want to make sure that stormwater programs and those who run these programs think about their stormwater infrastructure and what they're implementing and how they're managing runoff and whatnot, not just to meet a permit, but to look at a community-wide plan, long-term plan. So that's really the focus here, and that's what we want to get across here, and that's the value we think as an organization planning plays here. So just a quick overview of what we'll be talking about. After this introduction, we will be hearing about what is integrated planning and kind of the basics of that. We'll be hearing from EPA on that, as well as looking at technical assistance and funding that can support planning. That'll also be from EPA, and then we'll be hearing from the ground level, from the municipal perspective on how this stormwater planning and long-term planning in partnership with EPA has worked out right now, what's going on right now, and the lessons learned. And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A and a wrap-up after that. So we'll probably have 10 to 15 minutes as we go along at the end for that. The speakers today, Scott Taylor, who's the chair of NMSA, could have been on. I'm filling in for him. I'm Seth Brown. I'm the executive director of NMSA. He's had some technology challenges, so I'm filling in for him. We have Rachel Urban, who's with the EPA Office of Wastewater Management. We've got Travis Ostrom with the EPA Water Infrastructure Resiliency and Finance Center, or WRFIC. That's what it's commonly referred to as. And we have Melissa McDonald with the City of Santa Fe. So those are the speakers, and you can see other folks on the screen right now. Just real quickly, last bit of housekeeping here. This is being recorded, just as an FYI on that. We do have a PDF of the slides. I'm going to try to upload it while we're going along. If not, we will have it available and send it out to everybody. And we'll have a link to the recording. That might be a couple days on that, but we have a YouTube channel, so we'll post it to our YouTube channel so anyone can see it. We do have PDHs available. 1.25 PDHs are available. If you have questions, please use the question option. Don't use the chat. If you have technology or technological questions, put those in the chat. Like if you can't hear, some things aren't clear, whatever. I'll be monitoring that because we've got the great speakers who are going to be giving you all the information that we want to hear. So without further ado, I think we're going to transfer over to Rachel, and then we're going to turn our cameras off and give the floor to Rachel if you're ready.
Thanks, Seth.
There we go.
Okay, so let's get started. So as Seth mentioned, my name's Rachel Urban, and I am at EPA headquarters in Washington, D.C., and I am the lead of the stormwater permitting team. So I'm excited to be here today and talk more about integrated planning approach and ways to reduce stormwater impacts using that approach. So let's just jump right on in. I first wanted to acknowledge that people are often asked to wear a lot of different hats, and I rarely meet anyone these days who only works on one focused thing at a time. And for stormwater, it seems like everyone covers a range of topics in their day-to-day routines and has many, many roles. And sometimes it can be a challenge to keep up with everything, but it can also provide a lot of opportunities too. So having a wider view allows the bigger story to be seen and really opens the door to finding more comprehensive solutions, because you're considering a wide variety of topics ranging from being more resilient to storms, controlling emerging contaminants, and increasing community green space and things of that nature. And because where stormwater flows, everything goes, it is listed as a resource of pollution, as a source of pollution, excuse me, in many areas where it picks up whatever it may come into contact with and moves it into nearby waterways. So there is a choice. One way is to try to run around and fix the problems completely by ourselves with quick patchwork approaches, or what I'm going to call like Band-Aid solutions. Or another option is to commit to more strategically thinking through the issues that we have to find real lasting solutions. And because everything seems so interconnected these days, as I said, this sort of longer term approach can touch on a lot of different aspects, from flooding of roads, which many experience, to trying to be more resilient, like I said before. And coordinating with a lot of other programs on a variety of topics is something that I often find myself doing, and I'm sure you're likely the same. And so I think that by just taking a step back and trying to figure out if you've got the right materials and the right people involved, you can really come up with some innovative solutions that are right for your community, so that instead of individually addressing all of our water quality goals separately, we can be more strategic and think more broadly to make decisions and really prioritize our activities and our actions so that we can address the most serious water quality issues first in our communities. And integrated planning does just this. Everyone can continue to be siloed and deal with wastewater and stormwater separately, as you can see here on the lower left of the screen, or instead we can use more of an integrated approach so that we can address things together in a more cohesive way, to tie things together, be more strategic in our decision-making process. And ultimately, we all want to save time and money. So this enables us to tackle our issues with more of a comprehensive or holistic approach, and then to use an adaptive management sort of approach too, to regularly look at the progress we're making, make sense of all the information that we're collecting and have available, the systems we're managing, and the needs of communities. And it can also enable us to like pivot if projects are not performing as expected or if circumstances change. And integrated planning, I put as represented by this, larger plant, this large healthy plant, because it's really showing that it can grow fast and towards that ultimate goal of water quality that's represented by the sun here. So integrated planning is a framework that helps municipalities to really look at the infrastructure investment needs that they have, and then to make approaches and select approaches that are most beneficial to set priorities and take action to achieve water quality goals. So the framework's approach covers the general topics that you see at the bottom of the slide, with a focus on planning ahead, getting informed, defining scope, building the team, determining priorities, and ultimately creating a schedule and budget. And integrated planning and its concepts have been around since 2012, when EPA established the framework and established this approach to consider stormwater and wastewater simultaneously in order to achieve water quality goals. Congress also recognized the benefit of integrated planning in the Water Infrastructure Improvement Act. So just a couple tidbits about some things that I found about integrated planning. It is voluntary, it's optional, not required. It typically takes, a year and a half, a couple years to work on and get things pulled together. And the cost of the plan itself usually ranges from about 0.1 to 0.6% of the eventual plan budget. So integrated planning solutions can lead to faster water quality improvements and human health protections. The solutions are also often innovative, so that we're reducing sources of pollution in addition to controlling or treating the pollutants in the discharges. They're more cost-effective and affordable, and they can often support other community objectives because they're thought about in that more comprehensive way that I mentioned before. And I wanted to pull an example, a quick example of these points, and found one for Akron, Ohio. They had looked into and pursued integrated planning to address projects as required by a consent decree. And they had a consent decree that totaled $1.14 billion in capital costs. And through the revised project sequencing and implementation of green infrastructure and partial sewer separation, the city was able to save $158 million in project costs between 2015 and 2019. And they actually treated an additional 826 million gallons of wastewater beyond what that consent decree required. So just to talk a little bit about what is in integrated planning, the framework has 6 different elements that you can see on your screen. They represent areas of trying to look at where you are now and look at relevant requirements and drivers and characterizing your existing systems. And then also making sure that, as you can see in element 3, there's a connection made with stakeholders to get their input and information that they may have that could really influence sort of what your ultimate goals and how you achieve those goals and objectives are. And then element 4, it gets into looking at preferred alternatives. So looking at all the options that you could do to get at those goals, and then ultimately measuring performance and adapting for success. So these are the main, I guess, building blocks, you can think of them, for integrated planning. And as you'll see, as we switch over into integrated planning resources specifically for stormwater, we're utilizing those same elements in the new materials as well. So long-term planning isn't a new concept. A lot of infrastructure planning programs have long-term planning, right? So the concepts will likely seem very familiar, but long-term stormwater planning can help stormwater management in order to be more strategic and proactive, in order to protect people and property and reduce flooding and pollution and enhance local economies. So one of the drivers that brings some communities to integrated planning is that sometimes people wanted to shift some of their infrastructure investments to stormwater. And often that results in a more robust capital improvement plan and asset management program. And that if the wastewater side oftentimes has these capital improvement plans and asset management programs. So just with a little bit more effort, you can add stormwater and get a lot more benefits because you're thinking about your approaches in a more comprehensive way. And the resources, including the guide that I'll get into a little bit later, can really help in launching these sorts of efforts. We also saw that communities were struggling to finance and prioritize and really plan for solutions to stormwater management in more of a long-term horizon. So we created these resources aimed specifically at supporting these stormwater efforts. And another reason we focused on creating these materials is that some communities only manage stormwater while another entity manages wastewater. And in some cases, those communities may want to look to collaborate across utilities to write a single integrated plan that brings their unique perspectives and solutions in order to benefit the community in a broader way. In other cases, they may prefer to integrate across a smaller suite of departments within their communities, in which case some of the communities we worked with, they've done just that, where they were really looking to work across the departments of their community. And with this, it really helped us to develop that guide that I'll get into in a moment. So remember the slide from before about integrated planning and trying to find solutions by considering wastewater and stormwater together. Well, for stormwater planning, long-term stormwater planning, we can use the same approach, and we just kind of can think about it with a little bit of a tweak there. You can break down the silos, and this time, instead of having the silos be wastewater and stormwater, you could have it be the departments with which the community has established that might touch upon stormwater. So you work together to utilize your resources better, all while accomplishing your individual goals. And you can look for opportunities to really incorporate stormwater management into other projects that you might already be doing. So things like roadway projects, parks projects, so that you don't only have to have standalone stormwater projects, so that you can save time and money by tackling issues with this broader approach. You can also use asset management approaches like other departments and sectors often do in order to be more strategic and especially the decision-making process. And then you can also better understand the interconnectedness of actions in order to make sense of all the information that you're collecting and those systems you're managing and the needs of the community. So there are a lot of benefits to this sort of longer term planning. It allows us to see stormwater more as a resource and to really invest in resilient infrastructure. It allows us to think about ways to revitalize our waterways and reconnect people to the waters that are near them, and to utilize space in order to make the open spaces within communities more enjoyable and welcoming. So it uses this broader approach, and that can enable stormwater managers to have more fruitful discussions with their counterparts at other utilities or even within other departments. It also helps staff to form new partnerships or to build on existing relationships. You don't have to start from scratch on everything. You can utilize all of those key working relationships you already have, but also think about ways to engage with those who maybe live or work in the community and haven't been engaged on these activities in the past, so that we can really get at incorporating diverse viewpoints and to better address our objectives and find creative solutions. And using these approaches also provides accountability both internally among city departments and externally to the public. And it provides a context within which we can discuss and consider new financing opportunities and to explore synergies that might exist to incorporate stormwater into other infrastructure and development projects. So we posted many new materials on the website. You'll see at the top of the screen on the left, some are more overarching documents. So that guide that I mentioned several times now is one thing, and that includes some lessons learned that we found along the way in working with 4 communities. You'll see that we have some worksheets that are editable so that you can download them, fill them out, update them as you see fit. You don't have to use them as is. You can edit them and make changes that work for your community. And we also have some community-specific resources that you see scattered on this slide as well. So let's start working through and talking through some of these materials as well. So the final guide that I keep mentioning, this is the main document, and it applies that integrated approach that I've been talking about so much up to this point to stormwater assets and concepts and resources. The guide really emphasizes getting input from stakeholders and involving those most affected by stormwater early in the process. And in fact, the earlier the better on that. It also highlights how to incorporate green infrastructure into community stormwater management in order to really support local jobs and improve community assets and strengthen climate resilience. And it strategically addresses stormwater needs. The approach is even helpful, I would say, if you're not developing an integrated plan or you don't have stormwater systems that are regulated under the Clean Water Act, because it just can help you to have a broader view and have an approach that will work for your community and is well thought out. And the end result of going through this process can be a standalone long-term stormwater plan, but it may not be. So some communities may instead decide to weave the long-term stormwater planning effort into multiple existing community plans, like a master plan or a transportation plan or some other sustainability plan that you may already have in the works and makes more sense for your community. So this graphic is in the guide, and as you can see, it follows those same integrated planning elements over here. We just have it bucketed a little bit to show you how you're basically walking through the same elements to assess where you are right now, analyze opportunities to make improvements, and then move towards implementation. And the guide also includes some overarching tips that we learned. First, getting people involved, connecting and engaging with the folks from the community and from departments, finding champions so you're successful, those who will keep momentum going and promote the effort at a higher level and empower those working on it. Setting your community up for success so that you consider combining goals and strategies across things like transportation and public spaces. Doing what's best for your community, be authentic in your discussions and choose how to use and document the information you develop so that you can customize things. And honestly, there's no set rule book for a single approach to any of this. It's all up to what works best for you. Another lesson learned, don't reinvent the wheel. Try to use as many of the existing resources that we have created here or that we refer to as part of your planning as well. And if your community had success with another sort of long-term planning process, then feel empowered to go talk to people who led that effort to see what worked and then consider a similar approach for stormwater. Hold parties accountable so that you can really make sure that you're keeping the process moving along and there's some built-in accountability, because we all know that voluntary efforts are often difficult and sometimes get pushed to the back burner, but having these outlined actions that you can do then really clearly clarifies expectations and provides accountability. And then plan to evolve so that you do what's right for you, and if something better comes along, you can proactively change to that. And then finally, take advantage of, like I said, the resources we've posted. So just to give you a quick look, you can see here that we organized things in the guide. This is a screenshot of the guide into simple sections. And we formatted it in a landscape view so that it easily fits on a screen, because we were assuming most people would be looking at it on the computer. And then throughout, we have these link jumps so that it's easy to navigate through. It also, like I said before, aligns with the integrated planning elements. And we included some groundwork questions that really can walk through and help for each of the elements to think through what the priorities are, what, in this instance, who's your champions, the main things that we found most useful as we were working with the pilot communities. And we tried to make all of the information as clear as we could. We also have these editable worksheets that I mentioned before, and you can see the main thing that I wanted to show for this is that it aligns with the specific elements and that some worksheets apply to multiple elements. So let's take a quick look at some of these examples. So from worksheet 10 is focused on strategy prioritization. This is from the middle portion of the planning process that was looking at opportunities. So you can see here, you'd be utilizing information from another worksheet that you previously worked on and comparing prioritization metrics between strategies. And then using those prioritization metrics to really rank strategies so that it can help to identify which strategies to work on first. And we provided this example that you see on the screen and others that you can choose from these metrics or make other ones that are more, that make more sense for your community. And next, really fast, it's another worksheet 10 that goes through, it's called strategy status, to help the community measure performance and adapt for success. And this worksheet is part of sort of the later portion of the planning process, so moving toward implementation. And it also builds on another worksheet. And again, you can see that there are some performance metrics that are here associated with the objectives and the strategy, and that you can add in your own evaluation notes with more specific metrics if you so choose to do so. So we also worked on some site suitability analyses for green infrastructure, and these documents guide through a GIS-based analysis to really look for opportunities to improve stormwater management by including green infrastructure and other solutions. And so it's a methodology that looks at the suitability of different sites to implement these stormwater controls. And it also provides, we have a few examples for different communities that are posted on the website to show the sort of data and information that was collected to inform whether something was a suitable site for green infrastructure. And there are really 5 steps. The first one looks at the physical characteristics to figure out what might be most suitable for each of the types of stormwater that are considered. Step 2 describes the criteria established in step 1 to either exclude or rate something for analysis to continue with the GIS analysis. And then step 3 describes the mechanics really of the suitability analysis. So it's a simple equation that can compute a suitability score in GIS for each pixel in the data grid across the city. Step 4 has this sort of heat map that is visually displaying site suitability scores so that we can visually see which areas of a community may be more suitable for which sort of controls. And then step 5 really discusses how to utilize the maps generated in that previous step to really figure out what practices could be selected for different locations. And once all those assessment results are produced, then you can add lenses like location of the drainage areas that might be prone to flooding, or prioritizing because you know that you're going to be working in a particular area of the city for transportation or things like that. And then obviously, because this is a GIS desktop analysis, then some field investigations will need to be done as well as looking at trying to estimate benefits and really finding funding options for specific projects. So we worked with 4 communities, as I mentioned before, as part of this effort. And we realized that some of the topics that they wanted to cover as part of their planning were very similar across the communities. And so we just pulled those together. Here you can see there's 5 main ones, ranging from asset management to stakeholder involvement, financing and funding, and green infrastructure and stormwater opportunities, and then development and redevelopment policies. And we're fortunate to have Melissa McDonald of Santa Fe, New Mexico with us today. So she's going to dive more into their efforts in a few moments. But first, I wanted to turn things over to my colleague Travis, and he's going to talk about financing and technical assistance that EPA offers. And this financing and technical assistance could be used to help support long-term stormwater planning that we've been talking about today. So with that, I will turn it over. Thank you.
Yeah, and just real quickly, Rachel, thank you for that. I wanted to clarify a couple of things. Just some questions have come in from folks. I want to clarify. A recording will be available for this. A PDF of these slides is now available in the handout section of the GoToWebinar app. So try to find that. If you can't find it, let me know. We'll be sending that out as well. Just wanted to clarify that. And also, love to get more questions coming in. So if anything comes to mind in terms of a question that you're having, as you're hearing information from Rachel and Travis and Melissa, please feel free to throw it in here, and we'll have a lot of time to discuss that. If there's any clarifying questions, we might address those in the near term, but we'll probably address everything else at the end. So Travis, just want to make sure you're good to go.
Yep.
Okay, let me give you the control. And take it away.
All right, should be coming up here in a second. Thank you, Seth, and thank you, Rachel, for setting this up. I'm just going to take a couple moments away to kind of build on everything Rachel was saying, and in particular give some resources that the EPA has available right now to help out with some of these efforts that Rachel was talking about. So I'm going to focus on just 3 things, including the EPA technical assistance that's available and some funding that's available. First, what I want to do is walk us through this water finance clearing house, which is a repository of information that the EPA has available through the group that I work with, the Water Infrastructure and Resiliency Finance Center, or WRFIC. And it has just a vast number of resources available, but you can filter down to what you're looking for, particularly stormwater. So there's a button on the home page that you can get right into the stormwater and green infrastructure resources. And you can further filter it down into funding opportunities, case studies, webinars, and videos. There's also a really nice learning module on there now called the Stormwater Financing 101 learning module, which is a self-paced module that covers a whole breadth of funding opportunities, financing schemes, all sorts of topics that can give you a really, I learned a lot when I went through it actually, just kind of overview of what you can do if you're looking to finance and fund your stormwater projects. So I encourage you all to check out the Water Finance Clearinghouse. It's hyperlinked here on the slides that Seth has provided in the PDF. But I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth in this section about the technical assistance and the funding that EPA has available. So many of you may be familiar with some of the recent congressional acts that came through the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act. So there's a good amount of money that has been put into water infrastructure, and it's available for stormwater infrastructure and planning as well. So much of this funding has gone into the programs shown on the right of the screen here, Clean Water State Revolving Fund and the OSG. This is a grant program that I'll tell you about in a minute. But the EPA recognized that just putting money into these funds is not making it available to people. It's not making it accessible to people. So the technical assistance part of it is really something that's very exciting. And it's something that's been around for a little while, for a number of years with the EPA, but it's really increased and expanded recently with this influx of money. And so the technical assistance, it includes a number of different programs at EPA, and there are also technical assistance through other government programs. And what it is essentially with the EPA is it's an EPA grantee or an EPA contractor that will work with you to help you access this funding, help you solve your stormwater challenges. So they can do this across the whole gamut of challenges you might have. And the idea is really to meet your MS4 where you are in the process. So maybe you need help identifying the stormwater challenges, maybe you need help in the planning. And so this is why I've put it in here with this integrated planning and this long-term planning process is these grantees, these technical assistance providers can actually help you go through this long-term planning process. Maybe the whole process, or maybe just key parts of it. Maybe you just need help with that community engagement portion, right? The marketing to get community buy-in. Maybe there are compliance targets that you need a particular help understanding or addressing. So these technical assistance providers can also help you build your technical, managerial, financial capacity. I'm sure every stormwater program in the country would say that we don't have enough staff. We just don't have enough capacity to do all the things we want to do. So this is a no-cost resource that is available if you request it to help supplement what resources you have, right? So help you better utilize the people that you have available, give them, you know, a little lighter load, help them do the things that they're trying to do. And so this can include helping with application materials, right? Getting that grant application or that state revolving fund application through to try to access that stormwater funding. So the two programs that I mentioned in particular, so the Clean Water SRF and the OSG program, these are two programs that are very different in size. The Clean Water SRF is a much larger program, and it offers affordable loans administered through the states that can fund stormwater projects, including planning. It depends, some of the ins and outs of it depend by state, but generally these are flexible programs. So oftentimes people hear a loan, they think, we can't sell a loan to our community. They're just not going to support it. I encourage you to resist that hesitation and investigate it because there's a lot of flexibility in these programs. I'm also want you to know about the OSG program because this is a much smaller program, but it's specifically targeted to overflow and stormwater projects. And it's a true grant program, right? So what that means is that the scale of this money, so $202 million spread across the country and across the number of projects that it might fund, we're talking about tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands per grant. And this can be used in this context to fund your long-term planning or your integrated planning process, or it could be used to fund key portions of that. So maybe you want to develop an asset management plan. Maybe you were just looking at a pilot project that you have. So this is a good entry point that can get your community going towards getting through this process and hopefully get you on the track towards accessing maybe these larger funds through the Clean Water SRF program, and then through some of these other funding programs that are available, as well as leveraging other funds through different programs. So the flexibility, as I mentioned, includes the types of projects, how the funding can be set up, how the loan is structured. If it's through a disadvantaged community, there's a principal forgiveness that's available for some of these. And that's the thing I really want to focus on here. So you can use it for planning and design costs, which is very helpful. But you also can use it as a way to get into the funding cycle, right? So the technical assistance provider can help walk you through, get you up through that first, that most heavy lift, right? The first time you go through this application process is always going to be the hardest. So you can use the technical assistance to help get you on that track, that path, to get you in that, the funding cycle and accessing more loans beyond that. So this is particularly for disadvantaged communities that have never done this, or I would say for the whole stormwater sector, which really, when we compare to the water or the wastewater sector, is not as familiar with accessing these funds. So I'll leave you with my last slide here is the EPA Water TA request form. So if you're quick with the QR code there, you can grab it or go to the Water TA website that's linked here. you can fill out a request form, which just takes you 4 minutes to do. That's really quick and simple. You get in the pipeline for requesting, you'll get matched with a technical assistance provider, and they can help walk you through meeting some of your stormwater needs. So with that, I'll send it back over to Rachel to continue on with the long-term planning discussion.
If I can jump in real quickly, Rachel, I apologize. I wanted to clarify a couple. A question came in actually that for you, Travis, right now that is associated with the TA more than long-term planning. So I just wanted to provide an opportunity here. The question is, how does someone request EPA technical assistance, and what are the requirements to obtain this? I figured that you could provide a quick answer, and if we can elaborate later.
Yeah. Thanks for throwing that in now. Yeah, so that's a great question. So go to this website, the epa.gov/waterTA. This will be in the PDF that Seth provides. So you can go there and fill out the TA request form, which should take you less than 4 minutes. Basically just giving a little bit of information about your community, right? It's, where is it located? What are your particular issues that you're trying to address? That sort of thing. And then that will get you connected with the EPA and matched up, if it's a good fit, with a technical assistance provider. And the eligibility is very broad, right? So you can be a municipal utility, you can be a nonprofit, government agency. There's a whole bunch of eligibilities, and the projects that can be supported through this are also very broad. So don't hesitate to either send an email to the water TA if you're uncertain, the waterTA@epa.gov email address, or put in a request through that form.
Thank you, Travis. I'll just say, as an organization who's getting more into trying to help with the TA for the water sector from EPA, I would just suggest spend some time at the site and explore. Sometimes you just have to dig around a little bit to understand the context of all of this. So thank you, Travis, for that. Rachel, I apologize.
No need. So I'm gonna pivot us to turn things over to Melissa, who's with Santa Fe, New Mexico, and she's gonna share her perspectives and experiences with long-term stormwater planning. And I'll just note that Melissa and her team kicked things off initially by talking to their stakeholders, both internally and externally, and they didn't really have any preconceived notions about their goals because they didn't want to limit their stakeholders' ideas. And I thought that was really a great way to sort of start things off with long-term planning. And I will say too that they've certainly been busy to take what we worked on together and then build upon it. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Melissa.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Can you see my screen?
I do.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So again, my name is Melissa McDonald. I'm the Parks and Open Space Division Director for the City of Santa Fe. And Santa Fe is a well-known city, but a rather small city. We have about 86,000 people. And in the greater Santa Fe area, it's 150,000 people. Now, I manage 77 parks, countless amenities associated with those parks, 2,500 acres of public open space, which includes the Santa Fe River, the 121 miles of trail, and 585 roadway medians. So my division utilizes a significant portion of the Santa Fe stormwater system, and I oversee the MS4 permit. Now I don't do that alone. I have 70 people that help me, and we work with stakeholders every day. I come to this position as a landscape architect from Virginia Tech, so I don't know if there's any Hokies out there, but there usually are. I moved from the East to New Mexico 30 years ago to start a landscape architecture firm, which I operated for 22 years, and it focused on rainwater harvesting, both active and passive. And I always tried to plant appropriate plant material, drought and native species, trying to be resource responsible. And I joined the city in 2015 as the River and Watershed Coordinator. And then I moved up to manager, and then now I'm the Parks and Open Space Division Director. And so I was the initial contact with the US EPA on this project. And I just want to really thank and give a shout out to the US EPA, because I really feel like this was a wonderful investment in the city of Santa Fe, and I hope it was helpful to them. I thought it was transformational for our community, and I'm really excited to share that with you. Okay, now I'm not sure it's possible to effectively talk about a watershed without talking about the history. And with Santa Fe, it's a really broad and diverse history. Our capital city is 400 years old. We are the oldest city in the United States. But before we became a capital city, we had a lot of communities forming in our region centuries ago. And the first peoples were the native peoples. And this slide starts to speak to this. And you can see here in the lower section, the native peoples would build their inhabitants on the mesa tops. And you can see here the imprint of their structures. And then just along the sides of the mesa, you will see the on contour swales that are kind of riffling down with rocks on them. This was dryland farming, and it was how they sustained themselves. And the interesting thing about this is that many of the techniques that the native peoples use, we are using in our LID work here today. And so they were really our first low impact developers in this region. And then if you look at the slide above here, you can see that there's this waffle pattern here. And this was a structure that they had used where they would create these earthen basins, and they would plant seedlings in them and then put all the mulch or whatever you needed to sustain the plant. And they would carry the water to these areas, and they would give it the right amount of water and keep it from running off. A lot of these principles are the water conservation thinking. It's water conservation thinking. I mean, obviously it was sustenance farming for them at the time, but it's setting the principle that we live in the desert and we're a culture that is really aware of this. Fast forward to the 1600s when the Spanish came, and they brought us the acequia system. And now the acequia is a term that means water carrier. And it's very important to know this is no ordinary irrigation ditch. Acequias are quasi-judicial recognized entities in the state of New Mexico. They have a mayor domo, and all the participants have rules associated with how this water is used. And I think it's a kind of a cool concept. They had the water came from the river. It would be brought to the floodplain, and then people would plant around in the floodplain around it, and then build their inhabitants. Now, this was a fairly, from an environmental standpoint, very ecological and passive situation. And we were in this situation for many, many years. Fast forward to the 1880s, we saw a huge population growth and population pressure. And that was with the introduction of the Santa Fe rail train. Now, that didn't only bring in people, it also brought in sheep, which you see down here. And you're probably like, why is she showing pictures of sheep? Well, the sheep were very instrumental in the development of our landscape because when they brought in the sheep, which were primarily for the textile industry back east, they really denuded our landscape. There was not a lot of controls, and in our region, they could pretty much go anywhere. And our fragile environments really never came back from that. So it's a very important thing to acknowledge as we kind of go through our work. So then around this period between 1900 and 1943, we started building dams. And the dams provided us the ability to grow as a community. We were able to get businesses and have homes, things like that. And it also allowed us to pump water to where we needed it. but it also dried out our rivers. And this is going to be important as we look at this. Also in the 50s, we see the expansion of the highway system. So again, we're bringing in people, we have a lot of growth, it's really great for our economy, and we're building out, but our river is suffering. So here's a big long list, which I'm not going to bore you and go through all of it, but this is important because this document that you see on the left is really our first stormwater plan. And this came about during this time. So kind of from the 1950s to the 80s, we started to see our river drying out. It was literally sinking down, and just not, the erosion was really bad, and we weren't alone. If we looked at the state, a lot of people were under this pressure. Our neighbors to the south, Albuquerque, were also experiencing similar situations, and they had decided that they were going to go with a more conventional way of approaching it. They kind of armored their banks, put in a lot more concrete, and we're handling the flooding and the water usage in that way. In Santa Fe, we didn't really want to do it that way. Folks were really connected to the river. They were sad that it was going away. They knew that it was the lifeblood of this community, and they really wanted to do something about it. So these early stakeholders essentially created our very first stormwater plan. And it was really about the river, but they talk a lot about stormwater in this. And it was called the Santa Fe Corridor Master Plan. Now, around the 80s, late 80s, a lot of people were starting to recognize these changes, and we started to see changes in our code, and people were acknowledging that there were a lot of issues associated with this. So during this time, fast forward, we get to 1995, this corridor plan was developed, and the city government heard it. And so in 1997, the government hired Bohannon Houston to develop our first stormwater plan. And this was a more engineered plan, but the goal of this plan was to implement this vision, right? And so then we fast forward to 2003, we get our first stormwater fee. And this is very, very important because it's going to fund this beautiful plan that we have. And I want to mention now, because I'm going to talk about it in a little bit, our first stormwater fee is based on our water meter size. It's not based on any stormwater, which I think is important. Then we get the most endangered river status, which is something you don't want. But during that time, we also developed what we call the Santa Fe River Commission. And this commission was kind of charged with implementing this plan. And it was some of the members from this river corridor group, but also folks in the community who are doing great things. So I kind of list all this other plans here, and I always think it's good to be cognizant of the plans that exist, because of course we want to build on those. Of course, we also really want these plans to be implemented. So I do want to point out one thing that I think is very interesting. The city of Santa Fe also in 2012 acknowledged the river with a living river ordinance, and this essentially gave the river 1,000 acre-feet. And this was very important to have, again, recognizing that we wanted a clean river, we wanted it to be part of our community. So we did all these plans, we had go bonds, things were really happening, but we were kind of coming up on like, what are we going to do with this? So here is what our river currently looks like. And I think this is really close to the picture that you just saw on the screen. And I think it's a beautiful river. It's very stable. We have 29 grade control structures in the river. We have various perspectives. This is a more rural looking one, but in town we have a little bit more businesses along it. It's really beautiful. It looks like we did a good job, right? So what could possibly be wrong? And I think probably people know. This is what happens every time it rains. So you can see all of the sediment that comes in from the greater watershed. So we have spent millions and millions of dollars on fixing our river, and it's beautiful and it's inspirational. But then we have this, and it brings in sediments that tear up our structures. It brings in pollutants. It brings in TMDLs like E. coli, which we have. And so we were perplexed as what are we going to do? We have our MS4 permit, which is a stick, which is very important. But when I came in, I said, hey, folks, we are going to have to recreate how we're going to look at this, because it's a little bit more challenging. Like redoing the river was a little bit easier because people wanted a nice trail. They wanted a beautiful place to recreate. It was very easy on a certain level. I mean, we had to raise the money and do all the work, which is very hard. But when you look at the MS4 and the fact that it's dealing with so many complexities, you have commercial people, you have state, you have local, you have roadways, you have private residents. You kind of need the stick and the carrot. And so our challenge was pretty broad. How do we deal with getting all these people on the same page? And from our perspective, we were very successful with rebuilding the river. How are we going to recreate that buy-in? And that was very important to us. So we initially hired Tetra Tech to help us kind of identify all of the things we needed, which were the GIS and coming up with our good housekeeping plans and the more technical aspects that we needed. But we then saw that this EPA long-term stormwater planning effort was underway, and we applied to become a technical assistance grantee, and the EPA thankfully accepted us. And so we were off to a good start. And we had hoped that this would break down silos, provide technical assistance, how we were going to do it, maybe teach us how to look at our funding, and forge beneficial relationships. How are we going to get that buy-in? So we all got together and we said, who do we need to talk to? And we broke it up into city agencies, other government agencies, nonprofits, private sectors, concerned citizens. And forgive me if I've missed anyone, but we had over 50 organizations, and it was pretty daunting. How are we going to get all these people to talk to each other and give us input and really get that buy-in, right? So we went through and we picked out who we thought would be our champions. And in the city agency, we really relied on the Parks and Open Space Division, the Santa Fe River Commission, right? Because they were implementing the river redevelopment. They could also help us here a lot. Our whole public works team was important. Then we started looking at kind of things out of our comfort zone, like our economic development folks and some of our land use folks. We felt these might be our champions. In terms of other government agencies, our permit partners, NMDOT and Santa Fe County became really important. In our nonprofits, we looked at the Santa Fe watershed. Our watershed groups are always a great place to start. The Watershed Association came out of that river corridor master plan, so they were really invested in helping us do that. Our Acequia Association groups, as I mentioned, Acequia is very traditional and important in our history, especially when it comes to the river. Our arid LID groups. Those are the groups that are either professionals doing green infrastructure and low impact development or just homeowners who are interested. But we had quite a few people because we are a drought region, people who are really caring about water and wanting to do something. In the private sector, while environmental engineers are always important, we also looked at landscape architects and water resource specialists. And then from our concerned citizens, we were thinking that our leaders might be our trail users, our dog walkers, because we really needed to get to them since we have a TMDL. And then we looked at our youth and our seniors and the unhoused. And the unhoused have become more significant, but it's important that we continue to work with these folks. So I say stakeholders unite. How do we get all these people involved to talk with each other? And we had about a year and a half that we worked on this. And so Rachel's right when she says 18 to 24 months. Took us about a year and a half. And we did all kinds of things. It was pretty much a campaign. How do we get the word out and how do we get the information back. But again, more importantly than anything, we wanted these groups to talk to each other, to understand each other's perspectives, and become our champions to help us in this process. So we started out with meeting in smaller groups with our city departments. We then had a huge public meeting. We had 60 people come, put it out in ads, everybody came. We did tours. We took people to look at some of our green infrastructure. We talked about what people liked, what they were hoping for. We took Tetra Tech's models because we did have a lot of technical data. But you know what we found is there are some people who really like a lot of technical data, and then there's a lot of people who like to talk about things. So we tried to make that balance. We took the technical models looking at where we flood, where we had sediment contributing, where we thought pollution was, and we kind of mapped all that out. And obviously the flood one was the most easy to do, but you see that here. We also brought our youth in where we had them go out and we paid them to get data at our inlet points and also describe what was going on and really truth that data a little more, and also give us some good information because we didn't have a lot of our assets documented. So we were having Tetra Tech do that, but it was nice to have this kind of truthing with it, right? And then we went to all of our nonprofits that do cleanups in our rivers and our arroyos. And our arroyos are, for those you don't know, they're kind of drainages that are similar to rivers, but they only run when it's raining. So that we had these groups telling us, again, where are the trash contributing? Where's it coming from? What type of trash? You know, what can we do to help stop it? Again, a lot of ground truthing. And then we built a couple rain gardens in the process, and you see here our elected official champions. They would come and do ribbon cuttings and support us, and it was just a really great process. So we took all this information and we had a lot of fun with it, and we feel like we were pretty successful in terms of really introducing people and just getting different perspectives, and we came up with our goals. And our goals are here. Generate reliable funding to dictate city stormwater programming. As I mentioned, we had a stormwater fee. We got about $1.5 million a year. During this process, we had developed a drainage list and a contributing list that we needed to deal with. It was $30 million. So we immediately, once we passed this program, doubled our stormwater fee. Why is this important? I think all of the work that we did in the community, building trust with people and hearing them and them seeing that we're really trying to change things, really made it that we didn't have a lot of pushback, which I think is remarkable and a real incentive for doing this type of process. Incorporate low impact development and green infrastructure concepts into new development, redevelopment. We were asked to join the city's design review team, so we get to see every development that comes through the city now, and that's been transformational to really look at what's coming in, how we can help make sure that we're looking at our stormwater. And then all the public projects too. We wanted to align our stormwater efforts with the city's broader functions and responsibilities, our sustainability group and our water conservation. We had worked a lot with these folks anyways, but we really, during this process, got to understand more of what they were doing and how they could help us, and not to recreate the wheel all the time. So we worked very closely with water conservation, and they put out a report card to the community every year, and we report where we're at through that report card. We wanted to effectively plan, construct, and maintain stormwater assets over the long term to enhance opportunities. That's always a goal, and I think we're doing a really good job, and I'm going to show you some projects at the end. Define our stormwater structure and organizational hierarchy. Well, we want to be king of the city or queen of the city, but we haven't been successful in being able to do that. But what we did do is go out and find our champions in each department. And this has really been helping, because when we need to get information for our MS4 reporting, we are getting the information more quickly, and that's been great. And in exchange, we're training them, we're giving them a lot of opportunity to learn about stormwater and how it can be incorporated into their own projects. So while we might need to make changes in the future, it's been a good opportunity. Then we have our regional planning, doing our regional planning efforts. We meet quarterly with the county and NMDOT, and I think we have a great relationship there, and it continues. So this is one of the guidebooks that the EPA was very helpful in kind of focusing us in what we might want to think about. And this is one of the guidebooks that we developed, and it's incorporating green infrastructure into a roadway projects in Santa Fe. Now, it's not a very sexy name, and one of the reasons that was that at the time that we were doing this, there were some engineers that were not very keen on green infrastructure. They didn't think it worked. They thought it was a lot of maintenance, which is always a problem. And we wanted to reach out to those folks and really bring them into this process and get their buy-in. And one of the ways that we did that was bring them into the roadway redevelopment to figure out how we could make this work. So in the guide, we went to existing projects that were underway, and we developed concepts, and we said, this is way you could look at doing this. And the one that I've shown here was done. Not all of them were done, but it was a great opportunity for us to really share ideas and put out there what we think green infrastructure should look like, the factors that we should consider. And in this guide, we talk about maintenance, both short-term maintenance and long-term maintenance, and how they actually, you have a little bit more maintenance up front, but over the long term, you don't have as much maintenance. And we talk about that in here. And so this was really helpful when we were talking with those engineers. It also was what we use when we have new projects. So when a project starts, we give the engineers this at the beginning of the project, and it opens up a conversation about ideas and how they might want to approach Santa Fe. Subsequently, the NMDOT did an excellent guide. They have their technical specs, which in Santa Fe, a lot of the engineers will use on smaller projects and such. And their guide has been just transformational as well. And then we again look down to our south, our neighbors. Bernalillo County just recently also did a guidebook. And so these things are tools that we can use when we're on our design review team or in the public sector, and we want to help guide the conversation and set the parameters. All of these documents are utilized and given to people, and it's been really a great thing. The other piece that we are really struggling with is our funding. As I said, we had a stormwater fee. We increased it after we finished this project, but we were trying to live within our means. We were collecting around 1.5 million. When we expanded it was maybe 2.7, something like that. And trying to live within your means is tough when you have a $30 million to-do list. And so we basically counted on the US EPA to help us leverage how we were going to do this. And one of the number one things that they talked about was going to the state clean water revolving loan funds. And I know that Travis just mentioned this, and we had never applied for these funds. And so we went out and said, hey, we're going to try to do it. We got our first 4.3 million. We were ecstatic. It's a low interest rate loan, and we were able to begin our phase one. And it's kind of interesting when you have a document that's telling you what you need to do. It's very helpful, and it also helps you get buy-in from other people in the city. So that was a huge success. Also in this document, it talks about applying for grants and using that additional revenue. Instead instead of trying to live within our means with the stormwater fee and also just wasting the money by spending it, we started to say, hey, we're going to use this for debt service. Now let's also use it as matching funds. So we've applied to 6 hazard mitigation grants. We've gotten 3 of them, which is exciting, where we have 3 pending. And this has just been really helpful. It's just transformational when you start to realize, and it may seem simple to some folks, but when you're a new or a smaller organization, you don't always think about these things. So this report has just been very helpful, and I encourage you to look at it. So here's one of the projects that we have been working with for the FEMA grants. And this is a project we're working with NMDOT. Actually, it's a partner project. They are redoing an arterial in Santa Fe called Cerrillos Road. And this road is a artery that was designed, main artery through Santa Fe, designed for a 10-year storm event, which many of us felt was shocking because we're really getting 50, 100, 500-year storm events. And actually this particular drainage area had gotten a 1,000-year storm event in 2018. So we knew we needed to do better. And it was constrained by the way that the roadway was built and its connections. And so we partnered with NMDOT, and they were a great support in this. And we said, hey, how can we make this better? And so we decided that we would take advantage of an existing channel, divert some of the water to that channel, then put it into a park and create a way for the water to be detained and reused in a more green infrastructure way. And this is at the very beginning. We have a lot more outreach to stakeholders to do. We have some interesting stakeholders. We have the deaf school and the Indian school, and we have HOAs, and we have businesses. And so all the work that we've been doing, I think, is going to help us with this outreach. But this is kind of conceptually what we're thinking. And this is a section through it, but we're knowing that we'll probably need to do underground infiltration chambers of some sort. We're going to have a rain garden type situation. Just really figuring out how can we clean this water, detain this water, and then release this water. So I'm looking forward to reporting back on that. The last project that we did that we're currently doing that I want to show you is the Midtown Redevelopment Project. This is an older campus in Santa Fe in the heart of our Midtown. And it's at 66 acres that will be redeveloped. It's most likely going to be affordable housing and moderate priced housing. It's the only place in Santa Fe where we are authorized or we're zoned to do 6 floors. We're probably not going to do that kind of density because we live in a more density concerned community, but it's going to have a lot more people than we're probably used to. It's going to have commercial opportunities. It's going to have lots of parks and open space, but it's also going to have a lot of green infrastructure. So all of this outreach that we did really heightened people's awareness of how important stormwater is. And this allowed us to be coming in at the ground floor. Like up until recently, so much of our work was just an afterthought, right? And now we're really in the throes of designing this at the front end, and it's very exciting. And you can kind of see the green infrastructure techniques that we're talking about here. But this is what we are looking for. And so this technical assistance grant and like getting out there and talking to your community, breaking down those silos really does have a payoff. And so we're really starting to see this, and I'm excited. The other part about this particular project is that it's going to be an overlay district. So it's going to have a controlled controlled area, and we're using it as a pilot project for our stormwater fee. So I previously mentioned that our stormwater fee was adopted with a meter size, which doesn't allow us to do any relationship to stormwater. And so we want to use this as a test case to help people understand that when you link it to the actual stormwater, you can create incentives for the developers, and it's a more aligned way of thinking about stormwater. So we're excited about that. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it back. Right.
Well, thank you, Melissa. And we we were originally going to wrap this webinar up at 2:15 Eastern time, which is what it is about right now. We've gotten a little bit long, but I think that's okay. We still have close to 200 people still on the line, so I'm going to suggest that we do our Q&A, and if people need to drop off, they can do that if they need to. So I'm going to show, there's been several questions that have come in about what links are available and what other resources. So just so you know, I think all the main links that have been discussed here are listed on this page. And again, this PDF, this is also in our PDF that's loaded up on the handouts part of the GoToWebinar app. So, and this will also be sent out afterwards. So just so everyone knows, we've got all the links here, so have no fear on that front. But now I want to address some questions that have come in, and appreciate all the questions that have come in. I want to go through a couple of these, just kind of round robin for each of you. Rachel, the first question is for you. The question is, you mentioned champions and how the role of champions in the long-term planning process. Are those champions that you mentioned, are those internal or are they external primarily, or are they both?
It really could be both. I think first focusing in probably on the internal champions to just get the support that's needed in order to even get a long-term planning approach started is probably key. And I think, Melissa mentioned champions in her talk too. And I think that, she was able to accomplish so much because she did identify champions. I consider Melissa a champion herself in kind of spearheading things along and keeping it moving. But, Melissa, you mentioned too that you had external folks that you were leaning on too, I think, to kind of help to share information and pertinent information for you to consider too.
Absolutely. So our watershed associations are really great connection points. Again, those arid LID people are really important because they're doing the work in the community outside of that governmental framework, but they have a lot of valuable and innovation associated with them. So those are kind of the key folks that I see from outside of our governmental structures that were really helpful.
Excellent. Thank you. For Travis, a question came in that said planning and design for a particular SRF project is different than integrated planning for an entire MS4 program. Is the latter still fundable with Water TA?
Yeah, so that's a good point. There's definitely the planning for a particular project, or there's this whole integrated planning, long-term planning approach that we're talking about. And yes, both can be supported through the technical assistance that I mentioned. So the technical assistance providers can help you with the whole long-term planning approach, or with planning and design for just a particular project. And then as well as in the funding resources that I mentioned, probably the Clean Water SRF, you're probably going to need a particular project identified. So that's less likely to be useful in funding the long-term planning that we're talking about here. The OSG might be a useful resource for funding this if you do need funds. More likely, you'll probably start this process with funds that you have, it would be my guess, and then use the OSG possibly to supplement or support that. But it also could be the sort of thing that you could access to get you on that path. But the technical assistance part of it, that can be really the entry point into getting you onto this path that Rachel and Melissa have talked about.
And the technical, okay, to clarify, OSG stands for Overflow and Stormwater Grants Program. Mm-hmm. For those who aren't in acronym land like we are in Washington, D.C. And something else to consider is that the Water TA can help you provide funding, right? That's part of the, so if you've got some, I would just suggest to folks that if you've got questions about what potentially could be funded, check out Water TA, and I think that those answers can be provided readily. And on that question, real quickly, I think this is a quick yes now. Are there similar resources for federal facilities?
So I think some of the funding is not available for federal facilities, but there are resources available. I'm not as familiar with those, but I know that the technical assistance is not available for federal facilities.
Okay, so it sounds like there's some questions on that, because I know that we had some federal facility folks online. So a question for you, Melissa. Does Santa Fe have resources for the unhoused population, such as shelters, / restroom facilities, or are the potential stormwater pollution issues considered or addressed as part of your integrated planning?
That's an excellent question. Thank you for that. It was not addressed as much as it should have been during our planning process, but subsequent, as I said, it's kind of on the rise here a little bit more. And so it's becoming something that we're looking at for sure. So we do have porta potties throughout the river corridor and different parks and areas like that. We do have shelters. One of the most effective ways, and that we've dealt with this in our river areas, are with our park rangers. We got a park ranger program, and what they do is they go in and they assist folks and get them to the right places, but they also get back data for us. So if we're starting to see pollution or people having types of activities you don't want under bridges, things like that, we can help them get to where they need to be. And so it's been a really proactive program. We've got them stormwater trained, which is fun because they actually know what they're looking for. And so there's a lot of really great resources with that. But what I'm really trying to do, if anyone's listening and has an idea, I think that there's an opportunity to have some kind of program where we can, or project where we can really start tackling homelessness, because I think all across the country, it's a huge water quality issue, and we really do need to figure out, is there some connection with these types of programs?
Yeah, I think that just in being engaged in different communities and different programs and states across the country through NMSA, I know that California has done a lot of focus on this in their CASQA conference and things like that. I know they're not the only ones, but I know that that's a leading issue there, as well as I think in Hawaii they've done a lot of focus on this. So there are resources out there that this is something that's broader than what, just Santa Fe, obviously. So it's something being recognized, definitely, and it is an issue that we need to develop, I think, in the sector overall. A question for EPA, and this might be harder to answer, but I'll throw it out here anyway. It said, is there any way that EPA can address how integrated planning would apply where an MS4 is subject to a waste load allocation in a TMDL, but the same municipality has some huge wastewater and drinking water costs coming up? I guess it's a question about affordability, it sounds like, maybe, as a driver, trying to balance not just costs with wastewater, but costs with drinking water. Any thoughts about how this discussion, integrated planning for stormwater, can, especially in the context of a large TMDL, could that be, how is that tied into this conversation?
I think thinking it through, it could help with some of the goal settings that the community would do in order to upfront start to identify objectives. And it sounds like, based on the question, that there were some perceived synergies, at least across the stormwater and some of the other topics that were mentioned. So maybe there's a way to kind of take a step back and think about ways to approach, whatever the TMDL is about in a more coordinated fashion to try to get whatever the pollutant is reduced through a couple different mechanisms possibly, or working in conjunction on different discharges.
Yeah, and I would think that this kind of question is kind of exactly the type of situation where you'd want to look at integrated planning, right? Because you're looking at all these different programs and different challenges and lay it all out in front of you and try to figure out what's the best way to develop solutions across these different contexts, I guess.
And I think that's where I was just gonna say really fast, I think this is where the prioritization concepts that I briefly touched upon would come into play too, because you kind of have all the various things that you could do, but you're trying to prioritize and look to see what is truly best for the community.
Right. And I guess the related question that I have, and there's another question, but just real quickly, how does affordability tie in specifically in this? Is that's a central question here with integrated planning, isn't it?
I think it's the same as sort of what I'm less familiar with all of what's the discussions are on the wastewater side. But I do think that it would come into play in terms of thinking through strategically, like what are you going to be moving forward on? What will you be implementing, and what can your community members afford in that sense?
So it brings into that larger discussion about affordability, which I think is what they're trying to get at here. And another, I think somewhat related question, it says, can the MS4 permit be drafted to provide for submission of an integrated plan to address the TMDL or other approach, which allows the municipality to prioritize its other projects, which is kind of what you're talking about with priorities, right?
Yeah, I think definitely if you're interested in integrated planning, I'd suggest you reach out to whomever your permitting authority is, whether it's the state or EPA, to discuss it and say you're interested in this. You know, through this effort, we did have states involved when we were doing the pilots, as Melissa mentioned. New Mexico is involved with her piece of the project. And I think that, you know, people are at the permitting authorities are interested, and there are resources that folks working on the broader integrated planning projects have created to help states as well as they're kind of navigating and thinking through how to incorporate things on their end as well.
Excellent. Okay. So just as a quick wrap up, do you guys want to do a quick 30-second kind of wrap up on your perspective on this before we finalize things in the next few minutes? Melissa, do you want to take a stab at just kind of a quick wrap up on where you're coming from?
Absolutely. If you're thinking about doing a technical assistance opportunity, do it. It was very helpful, and it's really still helping us today. Thank you so much.
That's great. Travis, do you have some thoughts that you want to leave us with?
Yeah, I would just really encourage anyone to reach out. There's a lot of resources available. These things that Rachel and Melissa are talking about, these guidebooks, we've got funding, there's technical assistance available. So please, if you have questions, just reach out and start somewhere, and we'll get you where you need to be.
Excellent. Rachel?
They just hop on that website that Seth shared the link for and really get to know these resources that we worked on. I think we really tried to set them up so that they'd be available in a variety of different ways, whether you're similar to one of the communities we worked with, or if you are very interested in a particular topic. So just dive right on in, I'd say.
Excellent. I think that's a good takeaway there is, what compelled us, just coming from our perspective, well, first of all, I want to thank all the speakers, of course. I want to thank all of you for taking time out and joining us today. But I do think that what compelled us as an organization to want to focus in on this is because we have our own questions, and we know that there's a lot of resources, and Travis has been brought on board relatively recently. And we've asked EPA, hey, we know that water TA is out there, but we don't see a whole lot of stormwater, and Travis is starting to address that. So it's a great addition to EPA. We want to make sure everyone knows about that. We want to make sure everyone knows about all the toolkit and all the information and resources that EPA has available on integrated planning. And again, as we're coming at this, integrated planning has been this phrase that's been used so much in the wet weather or combined sewer flow context. We know that it's a broader discussion, and it ties in with this long-term planning, and the lack of planning in the stormwater sector is a challenge, because planning, as we've talked about so much, brings in stakeholders, as Melissa talked about. It also, it helps us with things like asset management, planning for funding, and again, the water TA program just helps us on that front, and provides us better holistic solutions and more opportunistic thinking, which can save money overall, and just leads to better outcomes overall, engaging with our community, with our decision makers and all that. So I think it's something that we want as an organization promote more and more. So we really appreciate all the perspectives that have been shared here today. We hope you've learned something new. I think we've definitely learned some new things on our side. On the housekeeping side, again, I want to mention that the PDF is available still right now. You can download it now, or it will be sent out later. If you don't get that, or there's some kind of logistical challenge, let me know. We do have a PDF of these slides available with all the great links available. If there's any questions, let me know, Seth.Brown@nationalstormwateralliance.org. Please check out nationalstormwateralliance.org if you are interested in joining, whether it's as an affiliate member or an MS4 or state organization. We'd love to have you on board. So with that, I'm going to sign off. And again, thanks everybody for joining us today, and have a great rest of your week.